This video will show how to create the following two small JavaScript programs. First, creating a new JavaScript file in an empty directory, implementing it with a trivial program, printing the classical phrase "Hello World" to the screen. Then the Hello World program will be replaced with another program, which receives input argument from the command line and also receives keyboard input from the user. This video is part of at least one playlist showing how to do the above with different programming languages. There should be a link to that playlist in the description below. Prerequisites. You, the viewer of this video, are assumed to have some skills in at least some programming language. I will not explain basic concepts such as what is a variable or what is an array or what is a for loop. Even if you have never written source code with JavaScript, you are assumed to be able to understand, for example, what this JavaScript code below does. In this video, I am using Windows 10, and I will start by showing what versions of Node and NPM I have installed. Later in this video, I will use Deno runtime and will then show the Deno version. The Node version is 17.4. The NPM version is 8.3. The Windows command dir shows that I am starting with an empty directory. Now I create a new directory named gs_node with the Windows command md. Then I start Visual Studio Code by typing code and a dot, which is the path to the current directory. Then I navigate into the new directory with cd gs_node. When Visual Studio Code has started, I create a new JavaScript file, arguments_inputs.js, in the new directory js_node. Then I implement the initial trivial Hello World program by using the console.log method for printing the text to the screen. Now I am just showing with the dir command that the JavaScript file has been created in the JS node directory. The program can now be executed by typing node and then the file name. As you can see, the program now displays Hello World as expected. An alternative way of printing output to the screen would be to use process.stdout.write. And here I am just showing that alternative. As you can see, it also works. But I will go back to instead using console.log. I can also mention that the process.stdout is used internally by console.log according to the Node documentation. Now I will replace the initial Hello World implementation with a program that will receive and print out arguments provided from the command line, and the program will also ask the user for keyboard input and will then print out to the screen what the user typed. For this purpose, I have prepared some pseudocode which I will paste into the program, but within comments, since it of course would not be possible to execute. Then I will modify it by changing it into JavaScript code, which can be executed. Now I am showing how the program arguments will be provided when the program is executed. The arguments will be added after node file name and then a space between each argument. So here I am showing 3 arguments to the program. The program arguments, which is an array of strings, can be retrieved with process.argv. Then I implement the JavaScript for loop, which iterates the string array and prints out the array elements. When creating the string to be printed with console.log, I am using a so-called template literal with backticks instead of quotation marks, and the variable name within curly braces after a $sign. Now I will show the result when executing the program with 3 program arguments. As you can see, the 2 first array elements at index 0 and index 1 are the paths to the executable file node.exe and then the path to the JavaScript file. So the program arguments start at index 2 in the array. Since I wanted to print the program arguments, I therefore might change the for loop to start the iteration at index 2 instead of index 0. And another alternative is to use the slice method to get a new array with only the element from index 2. In other words, a new array which skips the first 2 elements in the array. When I execute the modified program, you can see that it works as expected. Since I used the slice method to get a new array, which is iterated completely without skipping any elements, we can use a simpler for loop instead, without using any index variable. Please note the keyword of is used in for loop. You can also write a for loop with in instead of, but then the iterated value will be the index value 0, 1, 2, and so on. But when using of, we will instead iterate the elements. When I execute the program again with the modified for loop, you can see that it still works as before. Now, regarding the other part to become implemented, reading keyboard input, it is more complicated than you would expect. If you're not using a third-party library, it seems to be necessary to use more code than in many other programming languages. When you look at the Node documentation, you can find the method readline.createInterface with two arguments, the standard input and the standard output. I am now copying a code snippet from the Node documentation page to paste it into my program. The method createInterface returns an object which provides a method named question with at least two arguments, one string with text to be displayed at the input prompt, and then a callback function which will contain the input as an argument. I am now also copying a code snippet with the question method to paste it into my program. Then I move the usage of the require function to the top of the file. I also changed the text to be displayed at the input prompt, which will be shown by the question method. Then I also changed the output text to be written to the screen in the callback function. Now I execute the program, and it almost behaves as expected. However, the program does not terminate automatically, but it seems to hang or wait for more input. I have to press Control keys to terminate the program. This problem can be fixed by using the close method in the end of the callback function. Now when I execute the program again, you can see that it now works as expected. This program was very simple and only using one input prompt. But how would you implement two inputs? That question has been asked at the Stack Overflow website. If you look at the code example in the Stack Overflow question shown here, you can see some nested code. The second argument of the method question is a callback, and in that callback the method question is called again with a new callback as argument. If you scroll through the discussion in that Stack Overflow page, you can see some critical comments about Node. For example, why is console input so overly complex in Node? Someone is providing a code example with so-called more elegant way with promises. Well, you can judge yourself how elegant you think that is. My opinion is that it is way too much code for something that should be much simpler. Another critical comment in the thread. Why even reading inputs from command line is so complicated, unlike in any other languages. I think that if you want to read input from the keyboard in a straightforward way, as simple as it should be, then I think that currently, as of Node 17.4, it is probably better to use a third-party library, such as readline.sync, which I am now going to use. If you look at the documentation for that library, you can see that it is simpler in two ways. First, you do not need to first create an object with the two arguments std in and std out. And second, you do not need to use a callback function, but instead the method question returns the input in a synchronous call. So now I will use that library in my program, but first I have to install it. I will install it with npm, and first I will generate a new npm file, package.json, which will contain installed dependencies. I am using npm init to generate the file, and the flag y is used since I want to skip the interactive mode. You can see that the generated code in package.json is using the currently only JavaScript file in the directory as being the main file in package.json. I am now adding some code in the package.json scripts section. The left part is the name of the script, and the right part is the code to become executed when you type npm run followed by the script name. I am now typing npm run and then arg-inf, which was the name I chose to use in the scripts section of package.json. As you can see, it works, but I did not provide any program argument, so I will now show that it works too. You can provide the program arguments after the script name, and as you can see, they are indeed iterated as before. Now I will install the library readline-sync, which I will then use in the implementation. You can install it with the npm command npm install readline-sync. Now when it has been installed, you can see in the file package.json that readline-sync has been added to the dependencies section. I will now copy a code snippet from the readline-sync documentation page to paste it into my program. Then I modify it with the text to be shown at the input prompt. And I also modify the output text to be printed to the screen. Then I delete the code used previously before installing the library readline-sync. The call to the function require is also moved to the top and replaces the previous call to require. When I execute the program again, you can see that it still works, but now it is using less code thanks to the installed third-party library. Now I will change the program to implement the two features, program arguments and keyboard input, with source code that can be executed by the Deno runtime instead of the Node runtime. First, I'm showing what Deno version I'm using, and as you can see, it is version 1.18. Then I navigate up to the parent directory with cd ... and there I create a new directory, gs_Deno. In other words, gsnode and gsdeno are now parallel subdirectories within the common parent directory del. Then I navigate into the new directory gsdeno. Since I previously opened Visual Studio Code from the parent directory del, I can now see both subdirectories from within Visual Studio Code. And I am now using Visual Studio Code to copy the file arguments _input.js from the gsnode directory into the new gsdeno directory. The program will be executed by writing deno run instead of node from the command prompt. But first the program has to be modified to be able to use it with the Deno runtime. The call to the function require is removed, and the readline-sync method question is replaced with the Deno function prompt, which works in the same way with display text as argument and the input response as return value from the function. Regarding reading the program arguments, the node property process.argv is replaced with deno.args. Also, the slice method is removed, since the Deno arguments do not include the program name and the script name as the first two arguments. Now I am executing the program, and as you can see, it works as expected.